Welcome, Mustangs, to this episode of the Red, Blue, and You podcast. For today's episode, you'll hear from the Executive Director of Enrollment Services and University Registrar as we discuss the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, commonly known as FERPA. This episode focuses on questions that are especially important to SMU students and their families. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we'll start by focusing on questions students commonly have about FERPA, and then we'll move into questions geared towards parents. So what is FERPA, and what rights does it give students?
Well, FERPA is a federal law. It's been in place a little bit over 50 years now. And as you stated earlier, it stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And it gives students three basic rights as it pertains to their education records. First, it gives them the right to inspect and review their record. Second, it gives them the right to seek to amend any incorrect information in their record. And then third, it gives them some control over the disclosure of their academic record.
When do students' FERPA rights begin?
So at SMU, the FERPA rights begin when they first enroll in classes. So as an applicant or even as an admitted student, we don't instill the FERPA restrictions yet until they are enrolled. But once they are enrolled, then they have all the rights that the law allows for.
What do you consider education record?
Education records is very broad, so it's basically everything. Anything that's print, anything that's electronic, anything handwritten, anything that has the student's name associated with it, or really any personally identifiable information. So the student ID, their name, any record that SMU maintains in a system, in a filing cabinet, in our imaging system, in MySMU, anything that is related to the student is an education record. So it's pretty much everything.
So to make it really clear for parents and families, when we say everything, that includes transcripts, test scores, ID.
Correct.
Anything else
Correct.
Does it include?
Letters of recommendation. Really, it's anything that we maintain. So the only exception to that are disciplinary records that are not related to their education record. If they have work records at SMU, that is not based on them being a student. So if they are a student worker, then their work records are an educational record. If they are a student who just happens to also be employed at SMU, those employment records are not subject to FERPA. Any kind of health records, those would be separate from FERPA, and then law enforcement records. And then lastly, if an instructor has their own personal notes on a student that only they keep or that they may share with like a substitute, those are not considered education records.
Who can view students' records?
Well, first and foremost, the student, obviously, and then school officials with a legitimate educational purpose. And what that means is that they need to be able to view the record in order to fulfill their job responsibilities. So those are basically at SMU really the only people who can view an educational record. Now, the law does provide certain exceptions, and we have this on the FERPA website. So if they go to smu.edu/FERPA, all this information is there, and they can view all the exceptions to the rule that allow us to share their information without their consent. So basically, the student can authorize someone to view their record. But we also have certain stipulations in the law, like records related to financial aid, records that we are sharing as part of an audit or an accreditation, third-party contractors where we have a contract that they're providing a service for us. We are able to share the student records with them without needing the student permission. Anybody from the U.S. Department of Education, again, most of the time that's related to financial aid. And then in like a health and safety emergency, we are able to provide information without student consent if it's related to an emergency for that purpose.
So now that we've covered the FERPA questions students frequently ask, next we'll turn to questions parents often raise and how they can best support their student. Does a parent have a right to access their student's record?
Not now, not at the university level. So this is what's confusing to parents. From kindergarten through their senior year in high school, parents shared the FERPA rights with the student. But once a student enrolls in higher education, no matter the age, and this is what a lot of people don't realize. So, these days we have 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds enrolling in higher ed, especially with dual credit and all that, parents no longer had that same right. And it doesn't matter the age, it just matters the level of enrollment. So all the FERPA rights transfer solely to the student. And parents will be like, wait a second, I'm paying the bill here and all that. And but this is the law, and so what the law does provide is for students can authorize their parents to view their record, and we have a wonderful system here at SMU for that. And then in certain situations, if it's necessary, if a parent has claimed the child on the most recent tax return as a dependent, then we can. We don't have to. The law doesn't say we have to, but we can, if necessary, share information with them. But they would have to provide proof that they claim them as a dependent on the most recent tax return.
So my next question is, why would a parent access their child's high school records, but they can't access their college records?
Yeah, and again, this is very confusing to parents. It's how the law is written. They wrote this law in the early 70s, and at the time, Congress decided we're going to let parents have the same access all through grade school, all through high school. But once they get to college level, whether they're 18 or not, the law is treating them as their own adult when it comes to their record. And so that is probably the biggest adjustment parents have when their student goes to college is all of a sudden that changes, and they weren't expecting that.
Okay, so my next question is around, again, records that parents are able to see. So how can a parent see their child's records if they do request?
So first, what we want is a good open line of communication between the student and their parents. And at SMU, we have a wonderful system that allows students to grant access to their parents. And they can even grant, the different types of access. They may say, yes, you can see my bill, but you can't see my grades or my extracurricular activities. And so students can go into My SMU, and on their main page, in the left-hand menu, they'll see a menu item that says, release information. And they go there, and if the parent has already been set up in the system, they can just real easily grant them the access. If the parent hasn't been set up in the system yet, they can make the request to set the parent up, and they'll click a link, and it'll pull out a form that they'll complete to get the parent set up. And so that's our first and foremost recommendation for how parents can view their student's record. It's very easy, very convenient. If for some reason that is not possible, we do allow for a parent to make a special request. Again, they will have to provide us proof that they claim the student on their most recent tax return as a dependent. And then we can share it with them. They would have to do that each and every time they make a request. So it's not like a blanket request. Hey, here's my last year's tax return, so whenever I call, give me what I want. It doesn't work that way. Again, if they want that kind of access, they really need to make sure their student provides them that access through the system. But if it is a special situation and they don't have the access, if they've claimed them on the most recent tax return, that is another option for them.
All right, so my very last question in regards to parent access. So if a student has released their records to their parent, can the parent make requests on behalf of their child to enroll in classes or drop classes?
No, they cannot. So FERPA allows us to share information with the parent if the student authorizes it, or like I said, if they prove dependency on the most recent tax return, but it doesn't give the parent a right to action. And there are situations where parents may know that their student will be unable to act on their own. So let's say they know they're going into maybe some kind of medical rehabilitation, surgery, or maybe they're on a mission trip to an area of the world where there will be no internet during the time that they need to make an action. Or something like that. I always recommend, if you know that's coming, get a power of attorney, a general power of attorney, and that will allow the parent, like let's say if they do have to withdraw the student because the student is incapacitated and they can't do it themselves, with the general power of attorney, we could legally work with the parent to take an action. But otherwise, FERPA does not allow for a parent to take action on behalf of the student, just to review the record. Again, in those two limited situations, be their best resource to start out with if they have questions, if they have FERPA questions. But the other recommendation I have is we have one of the best FERPA websites you will find in all of higher education. It's so easy to get to. It's smu.edu/FERPA, and it gives all the information a student can need, and including information on directory information, which I failed to talk about earlier, but directory information are those items that the law says we can provide without student consent, like name, address, phone number. At SMU, we do not give out this information to third parties like the public schools do. However, we do use a third party for degree confirmations and enrollment verifications called the National Student Clearinghouse. So I do recommend if a student has blocked their directory information, that when they graduate, they may want to take that block off just to make it easier for a potential employer to verify their degree.
Thank you, parents and students, for listening to this episode of the Red, Blue, and You episode. And thank you to Bobby for including such useful information about FERPA. Catch us on our next episode. Go Mustangs.